Well, we're going to work on weld symbols today, if you couldn't tell. For the people that watch my videos on a regular basis, you lucked out. We got a regular lesson for my classes. So I know there's 2 or 3 of you out there that are just watching for the fun of it. So otherwise, all you guys in my class, pay attention. We're going to hit weld symbols for a minute, and then we've got a little assignment for you to do. So starting out with weld symbols, in order for us to actually make something out of metal, generally you start with a plan, and those plans will include some weld symbols that indicate where and how often and all those kind of things, and how big and small and so on and so forth, what the weld should be as you fabricate whatever you're putting together. So the beginning of a weld symbol is called the reference line, and it's always horizontal. That's just where we start. That's the base of our weld symbol. To the baseline, we add an arrow. Generally, it's pointing off of one of the ends. It doesn't matter which end, and it doesn't matter whether it's pointing up or down or whichever way. Sometimes it is broken and bends back the other direction. It just depends on what the symbol is being used for. In this case, the joint is where that arrow would be pointing. Obviously, there's nothing there to point at, so it's just pointing off into nothing. But in reality, a weld symbol would be pointing at the joint to be welded, or the area to be welded. The arrow side versus the other side is indicated by which side of the baseline the information is on that symbol. So for instance, any symbols up here on the top side of the line indicates that it's going to be on the other side of the piece that the arrow is pointing at. And then again, anything that you've got below that reference line is a weld or something that's taking place on the same side as the arrow in the drawing. So if you take a look at this little diagram over here, you can see that the weld up here, the weld symbol is pointing at this joint, and the weld symbol, this little guy here, is on the bottom, which is the arrow side. Then we've got the weld that takes place on the same side that the arrow pointed at. Now, the next one down, still pointing at the same place, right? But the weld symbol itself is on the top of the line, so the weld actually takes place on the other side. Okay, hopefully that's making sense to you now. If we look down here, this one's a little bit different. Everything pops up when you put your mouse down there, apparently. Gotta go away. There we go. That's not going to be very helpful. It's in my way. It's in your way. So if you've got the joint again, or the arrow pointing at that joint again, but the weld symbols are on both sides of the lines, well, you guessed it. The weld happens on both sides. So that will affect the way you put your welds together. Okay? It's where the symbol is on that reference line. Next thing is the tail on the back end of that reference line. And again, if the arrow's on the other side of the line, you're going to see the tail on the opposite side. And that's just going to give us some other information, like which processes we might use, any specifications that that weld would need to have, or other procedures, or so on and so forth. So next couple of symbols I want to show you are just some special symbols. In this case, we've got an all the way around symbol, that circle right there where the line and the arrow meet. If you see that, it means to weld all the way around whatever that joint is. So you're welding on both sides. If it's a pipe, you're welding all the way around. If it's tubing, it's all the way around. So anytime you see that, just weld all the way around whatever you're working on. Next one is this little flag. That's called the field symbol, or weld in the field. So if you were building something that you have to put parts together in the shop, and then you take them somewhere else to assemble them, maybe transporting them, they're too big to get down the road unless you've got, they're just too big to carry down the road and they have to be assembled later on. This is where it tells you this is what you have to weld out there when you're putting the thing together rather than welding it up in the shop. So make sure it's done out wherever you are rather than making the mistake of welding it up in the shop and potentially slowing down whatever project you've got going on. So that one out in the field, fill symbol. I don't know why I have that writing in there. Anyway, because I didn't think that was just part of the template. Anyway, let's go here. Here's a few symbols that you may see. First one over here, we'll start with a fillet weld, obviously. You can see I've got all of them showing that it's happening on the other side because it's on the top of the reference line. If you flipped them over to the bottom, it'd be the exact same weld, only on the arrow side. In this case, you see this triangle, right triangle symbol. That's going to be a fillet weld. And if you've got these two lines, square groove, a little box plug or a slot weld, and then if you see this type of thing. So again, this one's a square groove, this one's a bevel groove, and only one side is beveled. So it's indicating that there's one of the pieces of metal is going to be receiving, or one of the sides of that joint is going to be receiving some preparation, and in this case, a bevel. And it could be lots of different things. Like I say, we're just at the tip of the iceberg on weld symbols with this little presentation. So these are some pretty basic weld symbols that you may or may not see at some point. There's a lot more information that you may find on a weld symbol. Okay, you can see our field symbol and our all the way around symbol. We've got our reference line, our arrow, the tail, giving us some information, our area for the weld symbols, and then there's still a lot more room for other information. There could be more information coming up the top or out the back along that reference line. Things telling us how often a weld needs to take place or how long that weld should be. Lots of different things that you may find on a weld symbol. But for our situation, this is where we're going to stop for today in our presentation. Weld symbols are going to tell you exactly what needs to happen on your project or whatever you're fabricating, so that it can be built properly without being weak and without falling apart. The weld symbols are going to be what indicate how things go together. So maybe we'll put together another video to show off some of the other things of weld symbols one day. But for now, like I said, this is where we're going to leave it. So good luck. Well, of course, look back at the video and the little box with my head in it is covering up half the stuff on the screen. Well, hopefully you can figure it out because I'm not going back to change it. So anyway, one day at a time. Good luck.